I always have to do my checklist and hit the record button. Okay. All right. Um, Thank you, everybody, for joining us this morning. We're continuing our Business and Accounting Week this week. I'm Wen Yen, and I'm an instructor in the Business and Accounting Division. And I'm really happy to present this discussion today. We've got two great entrepreneurs with us. Um, this session is entitled Living Your Passion, and these are two women who are doing just that. And I first want to introduce to you Kimberly Hall, who I know because she was a former student at CP and one of my students. She is the founder of a business called Soul Inspired, a greeting card company that celebrates inspiration, encouragement, and empowerment. And Kimberly turned to treasured photos, written words, and running for solace and reflection. Um, the power of the written word is what inspired her to start her business. And we're so happy that she's here today to share her experiences. I also want to introduce our second guest. Wanda Mann is the daughter of a professional chef, and she began to understand the cultural significance of wine when she studied abroad in Spain in both high school and college. She has been writing about wine for more than a decade, and she has also created educational content about wine for her website and Instagram. And in fact, you can read her article, Wine's Wild West, in this month's Food and Wine magazine. So I want to I want to welcome both our guests and just invite them to give a brief introduction about how they took their passion and turned it into something that that they could make a living out of. Because that is something that we always tell our students to choose something that they are really interested in, that they're really passionate about. But often students, they don't know how to turn that into something that they can actually live on. So I'll go to you, Kimberly, and let you start off.
Wow. Thank you for the introduction. And I just want to say good morning, everyone. And I'm super excited to be here. And yes, I am a former student where I've taken classes at CPCC. Just to kind of talk about my background and how I made that leap of faith. I've been in corporate America for over 25 years. I was a high performing sales director. I never felt like I truly lived out my passion, meaning doing something that I absolutely loved. I love paper. I love running marathons. I do triathlons. I love everything health and fitness. And so I always wondered, like, how could I merge my two loves together? And one of the things I found out was that every time a friend of mine would finish a marathon or a triathlon or some big event in health and fitness, whether losing weight or 100 miles on the 100 rides on the Peloton, I was literally making my own cards and sending to them. There was nothing in the store that said congratulations. And so in 2000 and I want to say 16, I kind of toyed around with a couple of ideas, and I used CPCC, actually the Small Business Center, to for resources. I went to several free classes. I just kind of just wrote down things and was just like, how can I make this work? I wanted to be very nichey because I didn't want to be a greeting card company that, I love Hallmark, but I didn't want it to be something that you could go and just pull off the shelves. I wanted it to actually speak to you with grit, with determination that said, I'm so freaking proud of you. You are a badass. Things that you don't normally see in your very nice and sweet cards. So I decided and I started working on my business plan in 2017, 2018. I took the leap of faith. I started in a few retail stores locally, which, my experience as a sales director, I just kind of pulled on some of the things that I knew. And I eventually left corporate America, and I am currently in over 20 retailers. I'm on Amazon, Etsy, my own website. I work with a lot of running coaches to design specific cards for them. I actually facilitate mini workshops that includes doing vision boards and just doing things with paper to encourage and uplift others. So I say all that to say, here it is, 25, 30 years later, it's never, ever too late. And I hope that, people who are in that space where they're like, how can I make something that I love into, um, a more than just a job, but something that you're passionate about, that you really take the time and really understand like what sets your soul on fire. And it's not just enough to understand it, but to actually dig a little deep, understand like who your customers would. Understanding your audience is super key. And so the reason why I went back to CPCC is, I wanted to take classes in graphic design because I wanted to create my own cards. I have a degree in accounting, but I wanted to be able to tap into that creative part. Then I also took business law because I wanted to understand more, like what are the things that can help me succeed in my business. So while I had this previous experience in other areas, I kind of felt like I needed to, really just kind of you are never too old to learn. And so I went back and I had to learn about, how to work on social media for a business and not just personal, and really just create a business that I'm proud of and that could actually touch individuals. And so, nothing feels better to me than to get someone that says, this card is something that I keep by my nightstand or on my fireplace, or something that really touches me, that reminds me that, I'm courageous or I'm brave, or this card inspired me to do XYZ. And I know some of you are probably thinking like, people still send cards. Yes, yes, yes. I am determined to bring snail mail back, even though the post office is working against me. But there is something I think nostalgic about getting a card, a handwritten message, something that says, I thought about you. Because if you think about your phone or your email, all those messages, go down your feed. You eventually lose those. But with something that's tangible, you remember it. And so when you're thinking about what sets your soul on fire or what's next for you, I just ask you to think about, what makes you want to get up in the morning and say, this really didn't feel like a job. It's something that I love. And all the years I was in corporate America, I felt like I was going to work. I felt like, well, it was more than a 9 to 5 because I was working a lot of hours, but I didn't feel that sense of ownership. Like I really worked hard for other people, but never thought to myself that I could create something for me. And I think that's what entrepreneurship is about. And we're seeing it more now than ever with COVID. And so, when your business law class was awesome, the classes I took to learn how to do graphic design have been invaluable. CPCC small business, I mean, it's really helped me in areas that I really needed to, figure out how to move forward and how to grow my business. So, those are the things that excite me. So I don't know if that's what you want me to talk about, but those are the things that are exciting about being an entrepreneur.
Well, that was great, and thank you for the compliments, and they were all unsolicited.
I mean, definitely. I mean, Taking your class and hand-on experience, I think, is really so important. So I went to Florida A&M University, which is agriculture and mechanical university, which is I was in the School of Business, and our dean at the time had us to do lots of on-hand projects. The university owned small businesses near the school where we were able to consult with them and help them to grow their business as students. We did 3 internships before we graduated. So those hands-on experiences and opportunities like this to talk with entrepreneurs and to find out like how you got started and to see real life experiences. I think they're all valuable. And in your class, you gave us case studies that had us to really tune in and think about, like the one I remember, the one about the cruise and the contract language around COVID. And just those things you really don't think about that touch your everyday life are things that you need and not just, things that you read about. So I appreciate your class and I appreciate the experience at CPCC. It was all wonderful.
Well, thank you so much. I'm going to turn over to Wanda and ask you to give a little introduction and I think we're all probably wondering, how do you take an interest like wine and turn it into something? We're always telling people, hey, do something that you're interested in. Most people would probably think of wine as, like a hobby, something that you just have a drink when you go out with your friends. But how could we take an interest and turn it into something where not only are you able to become an expert at it, but also but also be able to make a living at it?
Sure, sure. Well, good morning from New York, everyone. Um, I think so often the things that we're naturally good at or that bring us joy, we aren't automatically directed to pursue that as a career. It's kind of seen as a hobby.
Right.
So similar to Kimberly, I came from a different, career background. I started out in events planning. But I've always loved writing. So even when I was a student, I drove my father crazy. I'm like, oh, when I graduate, I'm going to spend a year in Paris writing a novel. And he's like, does that pay anything? So there was always this idea that writing, even though I loved it, I was encouraged by my teachers, told that I had talent. It wasn't really seen as a way of making a living. But even as an events planner, I found that I was always writing things, whether it was writing scripts for events, writing sponsorship, packages, writing letters to, honorees. There was always some component of writing newsletters for clients. Um, and I often find things, as you look back, you see how all of the steps connect. So, yes, my father was a professional chef. So I kind of grew up with this love of flavors and food. And he actually bought me my first bottle of wine when I was 16 and said, don't tell your mom. Um, and that was because he wanted me to understand and I think have a respect, for wine, because it was an important part of what he did. And we did have that shared language of food. Even when we weren't getting along, that was the thing that we could always come back together on. And I often call it the foie gras and grits childhood because my dad was from North Carolina, but he was classically trained in French cuisine. So I kind of grew up with the best of both worlds. But it was really as an events planner that I started planning wine events and working on the logistics of making sure, we had decanters and tasting mats and everything was laid out. And I never really gave wine much thought beyond what Wynn said, like, oh, I like a nice glass once in a while. I know what a Chardonnay is, I know what a Pinot Noir is, but beyond that, I really didn't know much if we go back about 15 years. And really, it was the stories that intrigued me. Being a writer, I was an anthropology major in undergrad. I was just so intrigued by the science, the culture, the art, the history, the people, the places. It all comes together in wine. So when I finally had the opportunity to sit down with the winemaker, and there was this whole language that I didn't know. So when he's talking about, barrel toasting and malolactic fermentation, and I'm feverishly writing down notes, And it kind of sparked this, really was a hobby at that point. I started going to wine tastings, educating myself. At that time, I was already on social media. I call myself one of the blogging dinosaurs. I started my blog originally about early 2000s, I think maybe 2001, 2002. I was on the internet, primarily writing about cultural events and lifestyle in New York City. But once the wine bug hit, that kind of started infiltrating, my website. And I found that's really was my passion. That as much as I loved going out and writing about fashion and all of those things, it wasn't quite the same. For me, wine almost provided a grad school type of education that I could do at my own pace and really just it's opened up the world. So I always encourage people, when you look at that bottle of wine, it's not just, fermented grapes, it's about science. It's about someone seeing that plot of land and saying, what am I going to plant here? What works here? Who designed the label? Kimberly mentioned graphic arts, so often, like books, sometimes we look at the label of a wine and that's what compels us. So there's a whole world of wine. There's social media, there's marketing, there's selling it, importing it, exporting it. So it really is a fascinating industry, and one that more women are taking leadership roles in, especially. So it's an exciting world to be in.
Great, thank you for that. So at this point, I want to encourage everybody to ask whatever questions that you have. You can put them in the chat. I'm monitoring that. And or if you just want to ask directly, just put in the chat, I have a question. And I'll give you a chance to unmute and ask our guests. And really, the rest of this is a Q&A, especially for all of you to be able to ask our great guests your questions. I have a question for Kimberly here. If you could tell us more about what your interaction with the Small Business Center was like, and how that helped you in your business planning or business growth.
Sure. So the Small Business Center, not only do they have workshops that they put on the website that you can actually go to, they talk about everything from social media to marketing to, I won't say legal advice, but on a smaller scale, they talk about all the aspects of it, and they even talk about QuickBooks. They talk about the things that you need for a small business starting out. And so when I first started, I was just looking more towards, what type of business do I want? Do I want an LLC, sole proprietorship, those type things? The Small Business Center really helped me to determine, how I wanted to set my business up. Then also there's someone that contacted me several times and said, "Hey, is there anything that we can do that we can help you with?" And so I took them up. I had like a couple of 15-minute conversations and said, hey, I logged on for a couple of the virtual, because they have been virtual for the past couple of years. But they used to be in person, but they can really help you if you have very specific questions. And so that's what I actually use them for, things to talk about, social media, taxes. I didn't use them for QuickBooks. I'm an accounting major, so I actually had my own system set up, but they were really great for anybody starting out that needs help. And SCORE is another organization outside that helps smaller businesses as well. So I just took advantage of CPCC. It's local for me. I live in Charlotte, and they were a great resource.
Great, thank you. I'll give Wanda the next question. Whether you can share with us the positive and negative aspects of working for yourself.
Well, the good thing is you're your own boss, and the bad thing is you're your own boss. Because when you work for yourself, you very rarely give yourself days off, right? And you're involved with everything. You're the chief bottle washer. But with that, is at the end of the day, you're investing in yourself. in your dream. So I think that's what keeps encouraging me. But there's definitely a learning curve. I wouldn't say that I was naturally born a business person, or it was many years before I considered myself an entrepreneur. I really felt that I was a writer, and I never really saw writing as a business. So I would say the pro is you get to decide how you spend your time. You get to work at a pace that works for you, but it can also be very isolating. So it's really important to have mentors. And I always say mentoring works both ways. I've had mentors who were older than I was with a lot more experience. And also, I've learned a lot from younger people, especially when we're talking about how to navigate social media and changing technologies. And I don't think it always needs to be a formal relationship where you have a mentor where you meet at this time once a week. Sometimes it's just by mirroring someone. It's someone that you follow their career and you mirror, things that have led to their success. So I think it's really important that even though you're building your own thing, that you carve out enough space to let people help you, and not get in your own way, and get a good accountant, right? That is so important. But I always encourage people to try it. And there are definitely days that it's hard. But like I said, at the end of the day, you're doing it for yourself and hopefully for future generations, if that's the type of business that you're building. So I would say give it a try. And it takes time. Don't expect overnight success. And there's so many lessons in the setbacks. Perfect example, when I first started freelancing, I often took people at their word because that's the type of person I am. So if someone said, I'm hiring you to write this and I'm going to pay you this, I would go, okay, great. And you turn in your work and then you're chasing down a check. Or maybe that check bounces or it never comes. So I learned the importance of having things in writing and having letters of agreement. So you learn from those setbacks. So it becomes easier as you go along. I have a friend who always says, just live long enough, right? Because all of those things, you will have those bad experiences and those good experiences that round it all out.
Thank you.
If I
Um,
could just
and and I see that Kimberly, a lot of what Wanda said has resonated with you. You're nodding your head at many of the comments.
Yeah, I was just going to add one other thing. Wanda is so true about having a mentor, having others around you. One of the things that I found beneficial for me, because I was making all the decisions, everything was kind of silo based on what I thought, what my business plan was. And so I think it's important to kind of know that it's okay to pivot. And so in the beginning, I was like, my business plan said this, I'm going to do X, Y, Z. And sometimes you have to pivot. Example, everything in the beginning was all running related for me, soul inspired, right? And soul isn't just because I was a runner, but because I felt like, just like our fingerprints, we all have, we all have our different walks of life. And so it's about the journey. And so I kind of went from not just running, but more looking at it from the standpoint of encouragement, empowerment, and things like that. So Soul Inspired kind of pivoted a little bit and says, well, I'm going to open it up just a little bit more so that it's not just running cards. But when Wanda said having a mentor, I think that is so true, because I reached out to several people that said, "Hey, you're doing this very well," and and I asked a few people to be on an advisory board for me. And what that did was, I have a quarterly review with them where I kind of go over with these individuals. There's 5 individuals. Here's where I am. Here's where I'm headed as far as the future. And having that additional, and not saying I have to go by everything that they say, but having that additional help, or people that are experts in certain fields that can kind of keep you level headed and question. So if your core beliefs and if your mission and your vision is this, then Kimberly, why are you going this way? So they help keep you on track, help keep you honest with, staying focused, because sometimes you can get so caught up in so many other things and forget what the big picture is. And so having that mentor advisory board is definitely key.
Great, thank you. This next question is for Wanda. It seems like wine would be a really competitive kind of industry. How were you able to find a niche in a really big and competitive market like New York?
Yeah. But I think everything in New York is competitive. Even if you want to have a hot dog stand, whatever you do, New York, if you want to sell your CD on the corner, if you want to sing on the subway, I mean, everything in New York is a cutthroat competition. That is true. I think part of it is just constantly showing up and checking your ego at the door. So when I first started in wine, I was an enthusiast. Like I said, I was learning, but I kept showing up. So people started to know me. Then I started getting invited to better events, more exclusive events, educational events. I started writing about wine and people started, pitching me. So it's like, okay, people are resonating. My voice is resonating with people. But I think just showing up and doing the work, I know that's not sexy, but I always tell people, before social media, that's what we did. And yes, social media is part of the showing up strategy now. But I think it's really about building relationships and connections with people. So when I went to my first wine tasting back in 2000, I lost track of time, let's say 2003 or four. Um, those same people are still a part of my network, right? Those are the ones, sometimes they see something in you that you don't see in yourself. So for me, wine was just something that I enjoyed, but they saw something that where I could take this even further. And without me even realizing it, were kind of helping me get through these other doors. So um, and of course showing up and just learning as much as you can on your own time. The great thing about wine or anything, we live in the age of the internet. There's so much content where you can prepare yourself. I would always show up as prepared as I could, even though I knew that I was new to it and a novice. At least know something about the person who's speaking, so you can ask a question. Know something about the region. Know a little something about the grape. Just something that puts them at ease, because often we assume that the person speaking is completely comfortable. It's not always easy being on this side of it as well. So when someone shows an interest in what you're saying, that often takes it to a next level, and you build those connections. So very simple advice, but I think that's really the root of it: building relationships and just keep showing up. Don't get discouraged by what you don't know, because you will know it at some point.
Right.
Awesome. Um, this next question is, I think it's more of a nuts and bolts of, how do you operate your business? Um, with whether you pay yourself a salary for Wanda first and then Kimberly.
Well, to call it a salary sounds very generous. I guess it's about expanding what you do, right? So let's face it, very few people become independently wealthy from writing, right? I don't know any wine writers that have written like a blockbuster, just like a John Grisham novel. Um, but what wine has done, suddenly I'm being paid to do speaking engagements and lead seminars and to help on marketing campaigns. So again, things that I didn't envision is still a part of my passion. It's allowed me to learn new things, but also have different income streams coming in. So it's not always just me sitting at a computer writing a story, which honestly is the least lucrative part of the wine business. So being able to tap into other aspects of what you love, and sometimes you might get a project you think, I can't do that. I'm not prepared for that. But I always say, if someone thinks that you are, you probably are, and you just don't realize it. So I always say yes to something, even if it scares me and I've never done it before, and it works out. And that's why it's so important, again, have that advisory board, those mentors that you can sound off on when there's new opportunities. But I think it's really about diversifying the income stream within your passion.
I'll just add to that too, because I'm a new entrepreneur. When I say new, I'm going into my fourth year. So unfortunately, I'm not paying myself. I am reinvesting and putting it into the business. I am finding other streams of income. As an example, with cards, um, you know, I had to look at, although I love paper, I had to do a digital aspect of it so that people can download digital form of cards. That's an additional stream of income because I don't have to do anything with digital. I put it out there and people can download and reuse it over and over again. Where I get excited about is creating new physical cards. So as Wanda mentioned, when you think about, what you have to do from day to day, sometimes you do things that are kind of outside of the original scope of what you thought for your business. So those are some of the things that I am doing now with working with groups of people on vision boards and things that deal with paper. So you're creating other avenues too within your business. And how I hold myself accountable is a lot of the things that I learned in corporate, I try to make sure if they work then, they should work now. So I structure my days so that I have a half a day of learning where I'm on Skillshare or I'm, physically getting inspiration from others that are in my field. I am closing my books monthly like I did in corporate so that I can know what my profits are at all time. I think a lot of people get so caught up in the marketing and on the social media and all of these other parts of business that they forget that they have to make money. And so they have to look at not just making it pretty, but where do I cut costs but still keep quality? And where do I do things to really grow the business and not just make it look like I'm growing the business with likes on social media? So those are the things that you have to really hold yourself accountable to with a small business as you grow, is really looking at your numbers, really connecting with your customers, understanding who your audience is, and just really just keeping that lines of communications open as you grow your business and sometimes pivoting.
And Kimberly, kind of piggybacking off of what you just said about um, closing your books and taking a look at where you're going. Do you set some benchmarks for yourself, or do you set some goals for yourself for where you want to be after a certain period of time?
I do. I'm a very, unfortunately, it's unfortunate. It's not a good thing that I have analysis paralysis. So I'll start there. That delayed my start of my business for a couple of years because I do have analysis paralysis, and I'll analyze something to death where it's paralyzed me to start. So I had to get over that and say to myself that sometimes you're not going to go into it 100% ready. You're never going to be 100% ready. Sometimes you just have to do it afraid and just jump out there and start to swim. So I do have aspects of the business where I to kind of pull back and say, okay, here's the goal that I set for 2022 as an example. After the first quarter, I met with my advisory board and I said, here's some things that I wanted to do with quarter one that I had to kind of shift around a little bit. And here's some things that I got done that was supposed to happen later in the year. And hey, guess what? I'm launching 10 new stores in quarter two, but I had to do the work in quarter one to make it happen. So, yes, I do spend the time setting benchmarks and setting goals, but then I give myself grace because sometimes when you are in a position where things change or where you have to pivot, you have to rework it, still having the same goal, but maybe rework it just a tad. But you have to always look at it constantly or you're not going to be focused, right?
Thank you. Um, for this next question is for both of you, but I'll start with Wanda first. Um, as a Black woman, how do you navigate an industry where there might be old school ideas or gatekeepers? Um, um, what do you do when you encounter that kind of attitude?
Yeah, definitely. wine has come a long way and still has a ways to go. There sometimes lingers. I don't know, some of you might be old enough to remember those Orson Welles commercials for "We'll sell no wine before it's time." This idea of this very kind of patrician older white man in an ascot in a study with the wine. And really, there was this thought that somehow people of color, Black people, weren't interested in wine, that, or if we were, not in a serious way. So definitely when I first started showing up at the more high level events, there would definitely be double takes like, oh, who is she? Why is she here? Um, and I just kept showing up, right? I didn't let it discourage me. And I would identify who among that group seemed like they could be a genuine ally. Because usually there's at least one, right? That will, there's always someone that says something clumsy or awkward, and you just have to move past it and deal with it. Maybe not at that moment, but there are people definitely after the fact. Um, where I've said some, your comment was a bit, racially insensitive, and I'll tell you why. So sometimes you have to choose the moment when to check somebody, but also look for allies within those gatekeepers because they do open doors. And
Hello,
some people,
welcome.
honestly, even in a city as diverse as New York, New York
Hi,
certainly
how are
within
you? How can I
certain
help you
industries
today?
feels very segregated. And wine was definitely an industry that just even 6 or 7 years ago, I would do a double take if I saw another Black person. Like, whoa, who are you? Where have you been hiding? So it has definitely opened up a lot. And I guess the sign of getting older is when I meet younger women and they say, yours was one of the first wine blogs I started reading, or you're one of the first Black women that I saw in wine. And it's just true, if you see someone else doing it, it makes it seem more tangible and more real. But I guess maybe because I've been thrown in those situations my whole life, whether it was college or prep school, I've become pretty adept at navigating those scenarios. I'm not going to say it isn't daunting, but that's why being prepared always shows up. Being prepared when you show up is so important. So that I don't know if any of you remember Trading Places. There's that scene where he's like, a BLT, like a bacon, lettuce, and tomato sandwich. And that would happen when, like, oh, Barolo is made from Nebbiolo. That's a grape. And I go, I know Nebbiolo is a grape. And I would kind of rattle off a few facts so they would know, look, I'm not that far behind. You have to tell me what the grape is in the wine. So I think there's a way you can do it without still, making enemies and ignore the haters, as the youngins say. But I think the reality is that more and more people realize whether it's wine, education, business, um, there's we all deserve room at the table, and we've earned the right to be there. So anyone who thinks that I don't deserve to be there, shame on them. I just keep doing me.
And I'll just add to that too, as Wanda mentioned, being prepared is so important. Being an expert in your industry is also so important. So one of the things, not just as women, but as Black women that we have to encounter is to um, present ourselves that we are knowledgeable, that we are more than enough. Sometimes we encounter situations where the gatekeeper won't let you get to the decision maker, and you have to hold yourself in a manner that's very professional and in a manner that's knowledgeable to get to that next level and understand that it's nothing new. It's something that we've experienced all of our life, and that we have to be in a position that says, you know, you can't block our blessing, or you can't hold this gate for us that we can't get through. And so one of the things that we have to continue to do is keep showing up, keep being authentic and transparent and ethical in all areas of our life. And it happens. I mean, it does.
Um, the next question also for both of you. Um, uh, do you have you joined any professional organizations? And also, if so, what kind of value do you see in doing that?
You know, I always say when joining organizations, be very strategic. I know when I first started, I just wanted to join everything. And what happens is, A, that gets very expensive, all of the membership dues. You're not able to make all of the events, and that means you're not really networking and making connections. So I kind of divide the organizations I belong to in tiers. Which one do I need to belong to because it's considered an important part of my industry? So on paper, you need to be a part of that. Which organization do I care enough about that I'm actually going to put in some work and carve out time? So there's one that I'm a member of that I put in a lot of work because we provide scholarships to women pursuing careers in wine, the culinary field, and hospitality. So that's one where I'm willing to, give up some hours and do the work because that's something that I can see how it makes a difference in someone's life. And there are others where, there are more networking opportunities, but I would say just be very strategic because they can quickly become a money drain and a time drain, and you don't need to belong to everything. But if you kind of have a variety, if there's one where you can just show up once a year for the main event, that's great. If there's another where you're doing a few hours a week volunteering to help them out, and if there's another where you go maybe every other month or so, there's a great networking event. Some that are really good at helping you, promote your business and your services. Those are definitely, worth being a part of if they can get your business in front of other people. So that's my strategy with organizations.
Yeah, I actually pulled back from quite a few too because I got really excited and spent too much money and wasn't adding any value and it wasn't helping me any. And so I started really just going to conferences, networking on LinkedIn, going to events where I felt like I could give back in the community. So I would do more community events rather than organizations. I found that that worked better just for my organization because sinking money into being involved and not really adding value or getting or feeling like I'm getting anything in return or highlighting my business, it just didn't fit for my small business.
And the next question is also for both of you. What's been the most valuable lesson that you've learned as an entrepreneur? And I'll start with Kimberly.
Ooh, I think the most valuable lesson is really just believing in myself. Because I found that before working in corporate, I could, oh my gosh, I could pull all-nighters, spend a lot of time traveling and executing for others. And I found myself always not wanting to disappoint others, but I was willing to disappoint myself with things that I needed to do. So as an entrepreneur, I feel that when it comes down to it and you have to make the decisions and you have to step out on faith or as one of my favorite things is do it afraid. You are the person making the decisions for your business and you have to step up and own that. And sometimes, just as Wanda mentioned, showing up for yourself day in and day out. Sometimes you may not see something moving as quick as you want to, but over a period of time, little small steps, you will see that things will start falling into place. And so for me, I had to have that same confidence I had in corporate America because I doubted myself because, sometimes when things are black and white, it's easier to say, this is 1 + 1 = 2. But as an entrepreneur, you always have moving pieces and you have to be confident when you make those decisions. And if things don't work out the way that you thought they would, you have to get back up and keep trying over and over again. Like it's never gonna be perfect. It's never gonna be a time where you didn't have a failure that you didn't learn from it. But I think as an entrepreneur, you just have to continue to believe in yourself and just keep going. You just can't just stop and say, I'm done, or your business is going to end.
Mhm.
And so that's the thing that I feel like, just believing in yourself and just never giving up. Just keep going day after day.
What about you, Wanda? The most valuable lesson you've learned?
I think I'm still learning, I might have a different answer for you next week, but I think for today, what I learned was really the importance of creating the lifestyle that you want as opposed to having just a job and a title. Um, and that was always tough for me. I was definitely, in terms of my education, really geared towards having a more conventional, traditional career where the benchmarks for success were very clear. You do this, you get to that level, you get that promotion, you become a partner, you just do that. And that never really felt right with me. That just wasn't who I was. So the idea of creating something where I'm still learning and being challenged, but it also gives me the opportunity to have the life that I want. That I love to travel, and through wine I'm able to do that, and I don't have to go and ask, oh, can I have 1 week off? It's a part of my job to do that, so I'm able to incorporate that, and I don't have to make sacrifices to make that happen. Being able to share just time with the people that I care about, so often we work to provide material things, but it robs us of our time. So I like being able to say, I'm going to take the day off and spend it with my mom because I can do that. I don't have to ask permission. So again, yes, sometimes that means I might have to stay up later doing the work to meet a deadline. But again, it's just that autonomy and that freedom that makes it a little less stressful than having to answer to someone else. And again, it takes time to do that. Like, I kept my day job for several years. So there was that juggling act. But when I finally reached a point where I could walk away from the day job, it's like, okay, that was worth it. Sometimes I thought I was just being stubborn. Like, what are you doing? You're devoting all this time to this wine thing. You have a career that's going well. You're doing high profile events. You're making a nice life. What's your problem? Just be happy with that. But it just wasn't me. And I had to honor that part of myself. And I don't regret that.
Great. Also a question for both of you. Um, how important is social media to what you're doing right now, and how do you use it? And I'll start with Wanda.
Very important. I have a love-hate relationship with social media. I mean, really, so much of wine is happening on social media. So a few years ago, it was fine. You just had your little blog, you had a Twitter, you posted on Facebook, and you were done. Then Instagram came along. Okay, I can do Instagram. I'll post a picture, I write a nice caption. Now we have to do reels and videos. I'm not doing TikTok. It's where I draw the line. Not for me. I don't have time to choreograph dances. But social media, the pros of it, look, it really has expanded my network and my reach. To hear from people that are following you, that are in other parts of the world. Um, I've gotten writing assignments from someone who stumbled across me on social media. So I always say, just don't post anything that you think might embarrass you. For me, there's a fine line between, yes, my website is Wine with Wanda, and people need to know who I am. But ultimately, what I'm sharing are stories about wine and about the regions and the people that make the wine. I don't need to be a part of the story every day. So there's the delicate balance of sharing enough of yourself so that people go, oh, I want to go to Wanda's site, but also not turning into like a vanity project where it's just me every time with the bottle of wine. I think there's a lot more. And unfortunately, it's a struggle. But the first American woman to become a master of wine is Mary Ewing Mulligan. I've known her for many years. And I took solace in the fact that with all of her knowledge, I looked at her social media one day. She doesn't have many followers. She doesn't get lots of engagement, but she's a master of wine. So who would I rather follow and maybe learn from? The person who's posting silly TikTok videos like, hey, rose all day, or someone who's posting real content. So yes, it's fun. There are some silly things that I do enjoy, but for me, I like to balance the entertainment factor with still having some a serious message and some authenticity. I don't like this pressure feeling that you have to pander to this crowd that you don't even see every day to create this content. But it is important. And if you're not on it, you should be on it. I always tell people, if you don't own your name as a domain name, you should have that, because you never know. Maybe you don't know what you're going to do right now, but maybe next year, 2 years from now. So it's important to have a presence, but do it smartly.
Yeah. I feel you on that social media. To be honest, I didn't even start Instagram until I started the car business, because I was just like, oh, this is too much. I was doing Facebook. But I found with social media, I have picked up so many different opportunities. One customer was like, oh my gosh, I love your card, on one post that maybe had like 15 likes. And she messaged me and I was like, she said, I wish we had cards here at my local store. And I said, you can. Do you know the buyer at your store? Do you know, out of that one little exchange, I got 4 new stores to stock the cards. Out of that one little exchange with very few likes. Another example, I think it's also important to kind of post a little bit about who you are in your thread for your audience. And one time I is a few years ago, I flew out to California, and I did Run for the Fallen. And I am a widow. My husband was a Navy pilot and unfortunately was killed in a plane crash almost 21 years ago. And so I do Run for the Fallen. And I posted a picture where I ran in California, and I ran a few miles. I ended up running like maybe 34 miles over so many days, but I ran his mile in his honor. And posting that, it wasn't for likes, but it was just saying, I have a running car business. I'm running for my late husband. Out of that, there were so many people who were like, I am also a Gold Star, wife or a Gold Star family member, and I'm going to support your business and tell and spread the word. And all of that came out of social media, not because I posted it because I was saying, hey, buy some cards. I'm saying, hey, here's who I am. And I'm sharing a little bit of my life with my audience. And so social media is huge from that standpoint, because you want to show not only your business, but you want to show a little bit of yourself. You show, there's a person behind this business.
Exactly.
And so I think social media is huge. And I'm like you, Wanda, all the likes and the dance, and I'm not doing all the dancing and stuff, but I will do parts that show here's a day in the life where maybe I'm going to a store, walking in.
Exactly. Yeah.
That, but I'm just not into the dancing. Although I love to dance, just not.
Exactly. Same here.
Well, thank you for that. So we're coming up on the end of our hour, and I will just give each of you one last question. One thing that we always tell our students is that networking is really important, and both of you have mentioned that a number of times while you've been speaking. And sometimes what students say is, networking, I know it's important, you keep on mentioning it, but how do I actually do it? So could you each just give one simple example of something that a student can do to do this networking thing?
Sure. I mean, perfect example. I've done seminars like this before where someone has emailed me afterwards and said, I enjoyed it, would love to ask you a few questions. Do you have 30 minutes? And I think that's the thing. Don't think of networking just as transactional. It could be the first step towards building relationship. So I tell people networking isn't just about reaching out to someone because you want something, right? It's about showing interest in them, maybe learning a bit more about them, and then it kind of grows from there. But I certainly do, you can tell when someone, again, takes the time when they send you a message. This sounds really simple. Use their name. Don't just go, hey. Say, Dear Kimberly, Dear Wynn. Reference something in their bio so that it catches their attention. And people are much more likely to respond. But I often, now it used to be phone calls, but now it's Zoom. I definitely will give someone 20 to 30 minutes, especially a young person who maybe is like, oh wow, I didn't know wine could be a career. I'm trying to recruit more people for the fold. So just take that first step with the nice, thoughtful, short and sweet message. It can open a lot of doors.
I agree. One of the things too, I would just say about networking is don't think of it as something that you're going to dread to do. It's all about the mindset, right? And so, as Wanda mentioned, it's not that you're always getting something, but also ask, how can I help you? The first time someone said that to me, I was kind of like taken aback. They were like, "Oh, Kimberly, blah 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 blah. How can I help you with your business?" And I was like shocked, like was not expecting that. So when you're networking, just try to think outside the box. Sometimes if you're not used to doing it, it may seem a little uncomfortable at first, but I promise you, if you keep working on it, just speaking to someone, as Wanda said, saying their name, talking about their business, or is there anything that you can help them with? And then in turn, they're going to ask, hey, how can I help you as well? So always just think about it as a two-way street. And if you're a person who feels like you're an introvert, just practice and say, maybe next week I'm going to try to at least reach out to one person. It will get easier the more that you try it.
Great tips. Um,
Wayne,
and
Wayne, Wayne, could I say something real quick?
Sure.
I know you're going to wrap up. I don't know, I know this will be recorded, and I just wanted to say to Kim and Wanda, um, and to those that may be listening that are small business students or business students, I think that thank both of you, and I think both of you exemplify characteristics of what entrepreneurs and small business owners are. You demonstrated and talked about, your passion and your purpose and your vision. And I want to compliment both of you on that and your business examples. I didn't really hear my question, and I'm not going to go into that, but I just wanted to say uh, thank you. I did want to say to Kim, um, I'll get from Win your information and yours too, Wanda, because I do support um, cards and high-end cards. I buy from Papyrus and other handmade cards, and I do think there's something about buying and getting those types of things and sharing. And um, Wanda, I chuckled to myself when you talked about um, the perception people have about a lot of times about African Americans and wine. And I thought about your reference on the Eddie Murphy movie, Trading Places. And I thought about back in the day, the perception that, African Americans like Boone's Farm probably and Mad Dog 2020 and Wild Irish Rose, and that's the only thing we can drink.
So true.
Yeah, and how totally wrong that is. I just had a good laugh when I heard you talking about those things. So that was it. I'll get that information from Wayne later. So
Thank
thank
you,
you.
Sean.
Thank you.
Great. So I just want to wrap up and thank both of our guests, Kimberly Hall and Wanda Mann. Um, if you check out the chat at the very beginning, I dropped their website links into the chat in case you want to check out Wanda's blog or Kimberly's Soul Inspired website. I also put a link into Wanda's Instagram, which if you are at all interested in travel, you can see some of her content from her trips to Europe. I also did want to share that Kimberly mentioned a couple times our small business center. So that is something that is housed on Central Campus in the Hall building. Um, Anybody in the community who's thinking about starting a business, has started a business, can get free counseling through the Small Business Center. The Small Business Center also offers both free and paid classes, seminars, workshops, and also houses a resource library. So that is available to everyone. And the link to the website I also dropped into the chat. So for those of you who are watching this as a recording, you'll be able to see that as well. And again, I just want to thank so much both Wanda and Kimberly for sharing their time with us. They've been so generous and provided so many insights that are just so valuable to people who are really considering how could they turn something that they have a real passion for into something that you can live on.
Thank you.
Thank you so
you.
much for inviting me. I really enjoyed it. Thank you all.
All right.
Bye, guys.
Bye.